Hello and welcome to my easy to understand guide to Curran and Seaton's Power and Media Industries theory. Now, their theory is all about the way media companies are owned and structured and the way industries are run. They believe that in most media industries, we are dominated by just a small number of companies who happen to be very large companies. So if you look at the film industry, for example, you're probably all aware of companies like Walt Disney, Universal, maybe 20th Century Fox. There are a handful of maybe 5 or 6 very large film companies that essentially make almost every film that comes out at your local cinema. There are independent film companies, but they are certainly not as successful or large as those big conglomerate companies. Another thing that Curran and Seaton believe is that media industries and media companies are all about profit and power. Now, you have to look at some of the companies that you have learned about over the course of your GCSEs or A-levels and try and work out, are the companies that you've studied all about making profit? Are they all about becoming powerful and successful and dominant? Or are they not? Do they challenge this theory? So, for example, if you've studied straight out of Compton, you will know that some of the companies involved are very big conglomerates. So when Universal made the meme generator for Straight Out of Compton, it cost a lot of money. It was very difficult to do. It was a global project, but it brought in a huge amount of audiences. Hundreds of thousands of people, in fact, millions of people used that meme generator in the first few days of it going online. And that was all about trying to generate profit and trying to become more powerful. If you look at newspapers that you've studied, when you've looked at the newspaper companies that publish the Times, for example, it goes all the way up from Times Inc. all the way up to News Corp, right at the top of that conglomerate. They're a huge global billion-dollar conglomerates run by a billionaire, and almost everything they do is about making profit and becoming more powerful, whether it's horizontally integrating with other companies, whether it's vertically integrating, diversifying into other areas. It's all about profit and power. But not every company that we will study across the A-level is like this. So, for example, 16 Films that made I, Daniel Blake, they're a small independent film company. Are they all about profit and power? Certainly making a film like I, Daniel Blake doesn't seem to be all about making profit because it's a risky film. You know that it's probably not going to gather a huge audience at a cinema. And so perhaps it's about more for some companies than just money and power. Maybe for companies like 16 Films or TCO London that publish Huck, maybe it's more about making something artistic. Maybe it's more about the message and the educational ideas and themes behind their products. So maybe there are other things other than what Curran and Seaton suggest, and certainly for some companies that might be true. I mentioned earlier that Curran and Seaton believe that media industries are dominated by quite a small group of very large companies. And they believe that the result of this is that the products they make tend to be quite repetitive, similar, and we don't get very much choice or diversity because it's all about profit and power. And so I'm going to give you an example. If a film company, for example, makes a big action movie and it's really successful, and they want to continue that profit and they want to keep their power, it's very tempting for them just to make another action movie with virtually the same storyline. And sometimes that's why we end up with things like the Fast and the Furious 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Because if you just remake the same thing, if it was successful the first time, it's likely to be successful the next time. And so generally what happens is big companies tend to make a lot of the same products, whether that's magazine companies making lots of the same magazine. For example, when the publishers of Women's Realm magazine were first starting in the 1960s, they had several other women's weekly magazines that were virtually identical and had the same target audience, but which they were making as well, because they just thought, well, we'll make another one because the first one was so successful, we'll just churn out another version of the same magazine with a different name and hopefully we'll make more money. So Generally, they believe that this small, concentrated ownership results in less creative products, lots of very similar products, and less choice for us as consumers. By contrast, they think that if companies are independent, if they have more diverse ownership and they're not owned by these big conglomerates, then what generally tends to happen is that their products tend to be more creative and diverse. So have a look at things like TCO London making Huck magazine, 16 Films making I, Daniel Blake. Do you think it's true that when a company is more independent, they can make a product that is more diverse, more creative, more niche, or not?